Welcome Easily Dreamers to a really special video because today I'm joined by Anpu.
Hiya guys, lovely to meet you.
So great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Now we are, well, two things. We're going to be talking about British identity today. We're going to have a discussion about that. We are, where are we right now?
We are in one of my favourite parts of town,
Yep.
Covent Garden. It's quite a touristy spot, but also got lots of local culture and it's absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely.
It's amazing. I'm sure loads of you that have been to London have been to Covent Garden. It's got loads of like sort of street musicians and street artists and cafes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Amber, I want to talk about British identity, what that means in 2019. So Ambu, your channel is a lot about identity. It's about British culture, but it's about identity.
Yeah.
So like, what's your story? What's your link to it?
Yeah, so why I talk about identity is because I feel like I've got various identities and my subscribers are from all over the world. So I think it's important to embrace who you are.
Right.
And where you come from. And where you come from can mean lots of different things. For example, where your parents come from, where you're born, and you'll have different attachments to different places. And I think it's super important that there's no one definition or concept of where you're from.
Right.
So I think we're both born in England.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah? So, but then look, to be honest, we look different, right? It's the elephant in the room, and I think people who aren't from the UK will often assume that there's one kind of image of what it means to be British, for example.
Right.
So I'm ethnically Tamil, but I also identify as British.
Right.
So these are the kind of themes that I kind of speak about in my channel.
Right. That's fascinating, and I love that there's not one version of British identity.
Yeah.
I found that going abroad and teaching that I had various different colleagues from different sort of backgrounds, all British, born in Britain and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they were treated somewhat differently because they didn't meet the expectation of the students. If you weren't white, they didn't think you were British, and that's strange to me. And so identity, it takes so many forms, doesn't it? And I guess it's just something that I want to change that image that being British can mean so many different things, and students, you guys coming to Britain, like not to expect one certain thing, but to expect London being one of the most multicultural cities in the world, and it's something we celebrate here, and it's one of the most, the thing that I love the most about Britain,
really
about
nice
London.
That's really nice of you saying that, because a lot of people don't have that opinion. So
yeah,
and I think that kind of is because of. Do you think geography has a big impact? So maybe Londoners view that as a very positive aspect of the city, but then people from elsewhere in other parts of the country might not? Sure,
certain, the urban centres, I think for sure multiculturalism is celebrated. I think London, Manchester, Birmingham, etc., like hugely celebrated. Yeah. Perhaps that feeling isn't felt in other parts of Britain, but it's for the individual. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah. Let's go back to London and to you growing up in Tooting. So you grew up in Tooting, southwest London. What's that like? What was that like?
So Tooting was an incredible place because it was so different to the other suburbs in London. So Tooting was a place known for its kind of South Asian diaspora. So when you walk down the streets of Tooting, you would find sari stores.
Right.
And kind of grocers who stock vegetables and fruits from all over the world, exotic plants and fruits. It's often a place for to kind of celebrate who you are. And for example, there was a Hindu temple in Tooting. So people from the surrounding areas in London would go to Tooting and practice their faith. Right. But it's interesting because Tooting is currently known for being quite like a South Asian centre, but before South Asians, it was quite an Afro-Caribbean centre. Right. And then before the Afro-Caribbean wave of migrants, it was known to be quite an Irish centre. Right. So Tooting has always been a very dynamic place and a place to grow up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that idea that, because in London there are certain groups that live in certain areas, and they are sort of almost like custodians of that area. So similar to Brick Lane, right? So in Brick Lane, sorry, it's really noisy over there. So in Brick Lane, there was traditionally, many years ago, a largely Jewish population, and then they moved out, the Bangladeshi community moved in, and this idea that an area evolves, it changes. Now Brick Lane is quite hipster, it's very trendy.
Same with Tooting, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So it's becoming a bit more gentrified.
Which is a whole different debate. Gentrification is a whole separate debate.
Probably not even go into it.
Complex issue. But yeah, this idea that these areas change and evolve and leave, you know, their mark, which is really beautiful, like the Hindu temple. Anpu did a great video going to East Ham, where you uncovered another really beautiful Hindu temple. Really I'll link that up. Go check that out, guys. Let's talk about accents as well, because I think identity comes through accents.
Absolutely.
How would you describe your accent?
So this is really interesting because I've always been under the impression for such a long time that I've had a RP accent.
Yeah.
But having done some research, I realised that might not be the case. It's kind of like a mix between RP, MLE, which I actually, really interesting enough, I actually watched your video about MLE. Was it a year ago?
Yeah.
Where you talked about MLE, which I thought was really interesting, and then I thought, right, do I have an MLE accent?
Right.
And
how much of sort of your Tamil culture or heritage comes through in the accent from maybe your parents or something like that? Is there any influence at all, or were you largely influenced by the people you grew up with in terms of school and whatnot?
Very interesting question. I think that links into what we're going to talk about in the next theme, where I actually change how I speak depending on the social situation.
Right.
So in a largely kind of Tamil social setting, I would, the way I speak English often changes and is more kind of influenced by my mother tongue, Tamil.
Right.
However, to answer your question, I do think the majority of my accent comes from mingling with kind of, how would you put it, externally, British life externally.
Right.
So it's not really influenced. How I'm speaking to you guys now is not influenced by my mother tongue or my Tamil heritage. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I might be unaware.
And we're going to talk to you on your channel about this, about how one changes an accent depending on your situation, and I personally think it's really emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
But it's up for debate. We can talk about it later.
And do you know what's really interesting? Even though I was born in England, Tamil was my first language.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I was taught Tamil at home until the age of 3, where English isn't used in my household. It's only when I went to nursery that I started to learn English.
Wow, okay.
So, yeah, of course my parents did kind of introduce English at the same time, but really the primary language at home was Tamil. And so, perhaps deep-rooted in my childhood, there are influences with my mother tongue and how it kind of influences my accent.
Yeah. This is really interesting, particularly for my audience who are learning English.
Yeah.
Do you consciously remember learning English? Is it something that you, or was it just that you were so young, it was just...
I think it is because I was just so young.
Okay.
But I do remember having to ask my parents, oh, this is the Tamil word for it, but what's the English word? And my dad and mum would have to teach me. Even to this day, certain ingredients in cooking, because I've always cooked at home, and I've seen my mum and dad cook.
Yeah.
I only know the Tamil word for certain ingredients and certain vegetables. Okay. So I think that there's the kind of continuous learning aspect when you are bilingual, when you grow up in a kind of ethnic household.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of friends who have a similar thing where they're second generation and there is this culture clash between first generation and second generation. Tell me about the struggles. It's okay to do with work. What other aspects? How is that sort of balance?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Really interesting question, because I feel like not only have I lived it, but anyone who kind of has parents who are kind of first generation migrants would have experiences too. Kind of, it's a world away from home, and so you often find that the older generation are kind of getting accustomed to the new life here. For example, my parents, one thing that they struggled with is kind of the language side of things.
Right.
So you'll often find miscommunication is a really big problem. Right. As you know, I speak to my parents in Tamil, but my Tamil isn't exactly perfect. I do struggle with Tamil because I can't practice Tamil here in London, for example. So between the first generation and second generation, you find miscommunication in language, and this often brings about arguments at home. I found that cousins who speak worse Tamil than I do, they can't even communicate with their grandparents because the grandparents don't know a single word of Tamil.
Right.
And this often causes fights.
Okay.
So this is one element of life which certain diaspora face. A second element is, I guess, cultural values, societal values. For example, values around marriage, values around relationships, arranged marriages, things like that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of kind of societal mindsets, it's different. It's different, and so I think meeting halfway can be tough.
Right.
For certain generations. So there is that mismatch there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked briefly earlier about your accent. Talking about British identity, I want your opinion on this. So in London, if you come to London, for the young generation particularly, you're going to hear multicultural London English. It's the accent spoken by a vast majority of young people, and I think it's a magnificent accent that represents what London is. I want your opinion on it. I know you've done a video on the Emily accent, on the slang words. Like, I mean, do you agree with me? Is it an accent you hear as you're walking around?
I do, and to add to that, London is a huge place, so I think certain boroughs and certain districts have their own accent.
Oh, for sure.
I think there needs to be more research done into this, but I'm a massive believer that, for example, when I enter Whitechapel and areas of East London, I do hear a different accent.
Right.
And it's amazing in the same city how you can have various accents, little twangs, little slight kind of influences from mother tongue, and that's really, really interesting to see.
Oh, definitely. And multicultural English, I mean, I've done various videos on it, but it's an influence of the Caribbean community, the African community, the Bangladeshi community. Every community in London pretty much has added its own flavour to this accent. Obviously, the native Cockney, white working class Cockney accent is in there as well. It's a bit of everything. And you're right. There's no I mean, there's such little research into the accent. I want to do more about it. But and certainly multicultural London English doesn't feature in any English course book. No, you're not going to hear it in any English lesson. And yet, when you come to London,
it is the most prevalent.
You'll hear it. I mean, of course, we're in central London. We're in Covent Garden. There's every different nationality here. You're going to hear all kinds of accents. But generally speaking, like, multicultural English is really prevalent. And what I find interesting as well, it's a young accent at the moment, but as people grow, it will become the accent of...
There's a generational divide again.
Right.
The accents used.
Exactly. Sure. So, there will be, politicians with the multicultural London English.
Right.
There will be, there are already musicians, but this accent will become more prevalent, and so I think it's important to get to know what it is and how it works and whatnot. Okay, my arm is absolutely killing me.
I know you've got an amazing job.
Amber, this has been amazing. I've really loved this conversation. It's a really important discussion to have. Guys, if you have enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up. Obviously, go and check out Anpu's channel. It's fantastic. Loads of different videos looking at identity, London, language, everything. So
amazing. Thanks for having me on your channel. Really appreciate it. And we've had a great fun.
And we've done a video together on Anpu's channel, so please go check that out. We're going to link that as well.
Amazing. See you later, guys. Been lovely chatting.
Cheers. Alright, welcome EC Dreamers to... That's going in, that's staying in.
Amazing. What amazing introduction, man.